All right, everyone, we should be live. Let's make sure that's actually the case over on Rumble. Of course, I do see the chat is working. A good indicator that we'll probably go live in a little bit. Mrs. Tag, morning, clankers. Cam2425IA, morning, clankdom. 3 Degree Cut, GM Tag, Cam, Clanksy. And of course, I posted my books link. By the way, that's available as well at the top pinned if you're watching on YouTube. You can buy my books. You should do so. There's some good shit there. Just cast the net wide, go through them, see what looks interesting. You might like something. And Lemon Curd Zero, clank to the gorgeous morning. It's extremely hot here, so yeah, I'm McLovin' it. I'm hoping that we get storms later. That's they are in the forecast. There's about a 50-50 chance, which means I'm not going to hold my breath, unfortunately. But I'm hoping that we get a real rip snorter. I really love thunderstorms. For a while after getting struck by lightning through a screen door, I was not sold on them, but they're comfy anyway, as long as you're not outdoors in them or next to a screen door. Anyway, we've got a lot of news today. We'll be talking about the Titan sub incident first and foremost. That's definitely big in the news right now. 5 people were going to see the wreck of the Titanic in a sub made by Oceangate, actually. And it's a little bit of a confusing story. Unfortunately, I don't think it's going to end happily. I have a feeling it's going to end with, several days later, they've clearly run out of oxygen. We're not going to bother searching anymore because there's no way to recover the wreck anyway, probably. You could send another submarine down, and if you could find it, you could, I guess, scoop it up and slowly bring it to the surface to prevent everyone aboard from liquefying. Yeah, I'm not sure that it's going to work out well for them. I've got a few pointers that I wanted to talk about with regards to some of the news that they're talking about. By the way, I would never do that. It's not that I'm highly claustrophobic or anything, but going down 13,000 feet to look at a shipwreck that I can't even touch, not really worth the risk. Submersibles can be problematic, as we're seeing, unfortunately, right now. We got to talk about the fact that Biden is tied with Satan Hitler for the general election. We'll be talking about that. ABC host shocked by post-indictment poll showing statistical tie. What does that say about Biden? Well, it says a lot. It says a lot about our current political situation. We'll be talking about that. Don't worry. And also, we'll be talking about Mr. Robblee. Yo, Mr. Robblee. Yes, he decided to resign his job. Massachusetts teacher. He's Jewish. He resigned after getting bullied by a 12-year-old, allegedly after repeatedly bullying this student. And he was handed a... It's making the meme rounds. Just look up Mr. Robblee or go to 4chan and go to the politically correct page. You'll see what I'm talking about. We'll be getting into some depth on that one. This is the meme of the summer. So Summerfest has definitely begun as far as our memes go. And we've got other things that we got to talk about as well. But first, we'll make sure that we're fully live here. I think we are. Yes, indeed. There are 300 people watching live on Rumble already. So we'll be talking about that and much, much more. We have not a band account, but how many licks does it take to get to the Tootsie center of a Tootsie Pop, Daddy Sticks? Pride, UA, GB. Nobody knows. The owl keeps biting it after the 3rd lick, so... that dumb bastard is not into science. Just wants Tootsie Roll Pops. I remember those commercials, by the way, when I was a kid. How many licks does it get to the center of a Tootsie Roll Pop? And then the kid would ask Mr. Owl, and he's got the little scholar's hat on. 1, 2, 3, crunch, 3. And that was the answer. It's kind of mimetic. Good commercials. They were fun, hand-drawn. I liked those. I like the old campy, kind of juvenile stuff from the 90s was pretty fun. I don't really have 90s nostalgia like some people do, but there were some advantages to living back then. Morning cartoons, fucking fish sticks and crinkle fries for dinner. That's what I'm talking about. Kevin Dunn sent €2 without a comment. Thank you very much. You can get a word in edgewise as opposed to simply giving me money. By the way, to those on Rumble, I have uploaded a couple of emojis that should be free for use for people that subscribe to the channel. I'm not 100% sure how it works. One of them is Smuggler, and the other one is actually Guy Fieri. So you can, I don't know, look through the catalog or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. There's also the Ouroboros. That's only for people who are officially, like, it's a paid subscription to the channel or something like that. I'm not sure. I'll have to look into that, I guess, for supporters or something. I'll have to look into that. Yeah, I see Sigil Stone. You have figured out how to post Smuggler and Fury. And then there's also, I think you're also capable of posting the Ouroboros one. I don't know how to do that. I don't know. I don't really use emojis. Anyway, we'll get right into the news before we get distracted by, by Guy Fieri emojis. I was just thinking about the old Food Network account that used to be on Twitter. It's a troll account pretending to be from the Food Network. And repeatedly, they would have like weird shit about Guy Fieri, like today on Food Network, Guy Fieri will create a chili with jelly beans and cry about how his dad never loved him. Or he would do a shit fart in his jean shorts or something like that. It was the greatest account, but it's no longer there and nothing's archived. So all of those great old jokes are gone. Thank you. At least archive your good shit before you decide to rage quit. Not a bad account. Will it take 30 or 50 years for the MSM to admit to something that I can't say on a YouTube live stream? They will never admit to it. That's the problem. But yeah, we'll get into the Oceangate news first. Here's what we know. There are 5 people currently at probably about 13,000 feet near the wreck of the Titanic or in that general vicinity. And I guess one member of Congress actually called for a military sub to go and get them. I'm not sure about the logistics of how that would happen. I'm assuming there's a methodology by which you could attach a tow cable to it and slowly rise to the surface so that people aboard don't literally explode. When you're that deep, though, if you lose communication, it's probably not going to end well. There haven't been a lot of deep sea salvage missions that have worked out in time. We remember years ago, I remember when I was a kid, I think it was probably around the early 2000s, they were trying to lift a piece of the Titanic out of the briny deep, which I disagreed with because it's like, okay, right now it's in a protected benthic zone. Once you raise it up, it's going to start degrading really fast. It could be a disaster and you could destroy, valuable artifacts and valuable history. It'd be better to just study it down there if you have to study it. And they failed, and they failed repeated times to bring up chunks of the Titanic and similar wrecks, even in much less water than that. The odds of them, number one, finding the submarine, the submersible that's down there. Number two, that anyone would be remaining alive on it by the time they find it. And number three, successfully bringing it up without potentially killing the people aboard is a very low order of probability. Other things we know, apparently, and this is mystifying to me, this submarine, this tourist submarine, takes people down and then they come back up in order to see the Titanic or whatever. It wasn't tethered in any way. I don't know if that's possible to even achieve at that depth, but, for what it's worth. And it appears that it was controlled with an optical system that was a Logitech setup, which is actually the webcam I'm using now, is a C930 or whatever it is. It's pretty good, but I don't think it would function at 13,000 feet. I think that it would just shrivel up like a raisin under the pressure, and was controlled effectively by a PS2 controller. That's what we're finding. Some people are complaining that the hatch by which you leave the sub is only openable from the outside. Actually, that one, I've got to say, makes sense, because if somebody goes crazy, because of claustrophobia, they just get frightened. There's a basking shark out the window and they just go crazy. And then they loosen one of the nuts or bolts on that from the inside. Everybody aboard would die. And it would be a painful death. Probably not from the bends, though. I believe it doesn't. What would happen if you suddenly depressurized at 13,000 feet below sea level? Isn't it that you basically explode instantaneously? Like all of the gas in your blood and everything else just expands rapidly and explodes? I'm pretty sure that's what happens. Or do you shrivel up like a raisin? I can't remember. Anyway, if I were down there right now, I'd be saying my goodbyes. Unfortunately, these people probably at the moment are still alive. They are probably suffering in deepest darkness at the moment, waiting to run out of air. Now, maybe they're having an orgy. Maybe somebody had the foresight to bring some LSD aboard so that they can go with a little bit more dignity. But the place only has one toilet, and it's a sitting room only. So that must be fucked up. I feel sorry for the people aboard, and several of the people that we know were aboard were relatively well-known individuals, actually. And the chances that they recover them alive, in part or in whole, maybe 1% at that tops. So we'll hope for that, but it doesn't look good for them. By the way, why do you even have? And this is an interesting thing that I thought of. Isn't the Titanic a protected wreck? I mean, I know it's in international waters. Isn't there some sort of protection for this sort of situation? Why do you even have tourist craft going down to it? It's an archaeological site, really, from, over a century ago. Aren't you afraid that one of these submersibles is going to accidentally bump up against the side of the ship in just the right spot and collapse half of the hull or something like that? I would be worried about that. People should at least be dissuaded from going down there. What are you going to see? The same shit that you see in pictures anyway. You're not going to be touring the inside of the ship. So you saw a skull tumbling like a tumbleweed across the sand down in 13,000 feet. Wonderful. That's really lovely. It's not morbid at all. I don't know. I think you should just let the Titanic sleep. Stop trying to bring it up. Stop trying to, do the ecotourism sort of bullshit for it. Now there's another wreck right next to it, arguably. It's very, very intriguing that 20 years later, you might find the wreck of this submersible, 100 yards from the Titanic, again, looking through the portholes with a light, and all you see are 5 skeletons, obviously in disarray. David Gray, listening to Rogan Kennedy podcast. His voice is hard work, but in a strange way, I feel like it gives him gravitas. It's kind of lived and adds emotion. Yeah, but it's hard to listen to in the literal sense, so I don't think that he's going to end up being really a challenge for Joe Biden. You need to have somebody who, had more qualifications, I think, ultimately, within the Democratic Party. RFK Jr. would have a decent amount of independent draw, I think, in a general election. But he's not going to get to the general election, so it's a non-starter. Aaron Bennett, with BRICS now having 30-plus nations and some nations questioning the stability of the U.S. dollar, is BRICS still not a threat to U.S. hegemony? BRICS is 5 nations. There are other people who have applied to join and who talk about it. And certainly, there's nothing wrong with the dollar not being the only currency which is traded in. I don't see that as a problem, and I don't know why anybody else would. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the dollar is the aircraft carrier currency more than anything else. Trash Panda, at those depths with that kind of pressure, you would get crushed, not explode. Real nasty way to die. Okay, so yeah, you wouldn't explode, you would just boil. You get compressed so much that you instantaneously boil and basically lie there in a pile of your own goo, dying. Well, actually, it wouldn't be maybe that painful a death. I think your brain would boil too, so your neurons wouldn't be functioning very long. A tax collector. Sticks, do you think there will be another civil war in the U.S.? And if so, do you think it will resemble the Colombian or Irish civil wars? I don't know. I don't think it'll happen anytime soon, though. I'm more optimistic on that end. But in the long term, let's say the country survives another 500 years. Yeah, there could be another civil war in there. It might be like the U.S. Civil War the second time around. Comstar Knight 36, see USS Thresher and Scorpion disaster. Subs past crush depth will implode. It happens in a 0.023 of a second. It'll be quick. They shouldn't have been down there. Yeah, I'm wondering why the fuck are tourist subs going down to see the Titanic anyway? It doesn't make any sense. I would think you would want to protect the relics that are there at the very least for the possible extraction in the future that could be done. I don't support doing such an extraction, but I mean, there should be some sort of agreement on that. Big Mike, Clank. Society's Writer over on Rumble. Just recently started my website, www.societieswriter.com, if you ever want to check it out. Love your work as well. Thank you very much. So a shout out to you, Society's Writer. Not a banned account. When will civilians live on the moon? Damn it. Probably sooner than you think. It's already possible with current technology, has been for decades. It's basically about the will to do so. And imagine living on the moon in that remote of space. Well, it could be you're definitely going to have a good psych profile on people. Do you trust the Biden administration to pull it off? Look at Sam Brinton, you know, the kleptomaniac who was given access to top secret nuclear technology. Yeah, the Biden admin should definitely be doing the psych profiles of the astronauts that'll have to spend several years isolated from Earth. That'll be perfectly fine. BW, theory out there is that the Belgian company that bought Budweiser purposely sabotaged Bud Light to get rid of American workers. I doubt that. I saw that report from an anonymous source within the company that used to work with them, and I don't believe it. I think it genuinely was a fuck-up moment. They fucked up, they fucked around and found out, and I don't think there's anything further to it. We'll be talking about the success of the boycotts, by the way, in this live stream. Mulgera85, what would probably happen would be what happened with the Beeford dolphin disaster. If someone opened the hatch, the autopsy photos of that disaster are horrific. I think I've heard of that, yeah. Basically a puddle of undifferentiated organ matter, if I remember correctly. Dagnabbit32, the Titanic was sunk on the will of Jekyll Island. Change my mind. Kilroy was here. Good morning, Sticks, and to Anton. I bought some biltong yesterday and used promo code STICKS for free shipping. Yum, yum. And speak of the devil, we have King of Biltong. Good morning from Anton's in Roanoke, Texas. Hashtag Clank Nation. Yes, you can get your meat. Darun Albane, do you prefer plot lines or backstories? Only men of culture get the question. And as a man of culture, I pick both. RGE quote. Yeah. Yeah, both are fine. Yeah. You got to have a plot and a story, but, you know, part of that plot is going to be framed against a backstory. So I guess that makes sense. Next news story, since we talked about, unfortunately, what is likely to be a disastrous sub-voyage. Something went wrong. Communication was lost. They're probably down there waiting to die right now. Unfortunately for them, they got a couple days to wait because that's how much oxygen they have. So hopefully they're fucking one another and minding their time, you know, taking turns shitting because they're going to have to. And hopefully somebody brought some booze or other drugs or something like that so they can at least have a couple shots before they almost inevitably die. ABC host shocked by post-Trump indictment poll showing statistical tie. What does that say about Biden? Former Maryland Governor Hogan says third-party candidate possible due to Biden and Trump's unpopularity. Well, firstly, Biden is much more unpopular than Trump. As far as in-party, Biden doesn't have nearly as much support. Trump kicks it with Republicans completely. Joe Biden is sub-mediocre, basically, in-party. The unfavorability for both extends to independent voters. I would point out that have become much more numerous in past years, and that's true. It reminded me of something that I saw years and years ago. And for the Zoomers out there, you won't remember this because even if you were born, you were too little to care. It reminds me of the 2004 election, actually. It reminds me of a moment when people were remarking on the fact that George W. Bush, and I don't like George W. I'm not simping for him. I've never been a fan of his, so we'll get that out of the way. George W. Bush was reckoned at the time, you know, this is the pre-Trump era, so generic conservative like a neocon, simply because he had started a war, was reckoned to be Hitler, the less intelligent version of Satan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He's everything wrong with the world. And of course, those were partially on the mark. If you look at the carpetbagging of FEMA right before Katrina and many of the other things W did, yeah, the criticism was apt. And people pointed out how funny it was that he had been completely dragged by that point in the election for warmongering, for the bravado of the mission accomplished shit. I think Abu Ghraib had happened by then as well. And then for multiple other things. The economy had some problems, although it really doesn't come to a head till the tail end of his administration's second term. You had numerous problems in the United States. The Patriot Act was wearing thin, et cetera, et cetera. And John Kerry came in and ran against him. And John Kerry in the polls was about 50-50 with him. He was tied with Hitler. And everyone thought that was amusing at the time. And I remember people making jokes about it. And it reminds me of this. Donald Trump supposedly is everything wrong with the world. He's a criminal and a lunatic, and he wants to destroy democracy, and he wants to rip apart the fabric of the Constitution, and all of these other terrible things. And yet Biden is arguably a couple of points behind him. It's not a statistical tie. Donald Trump in some of the recent polls has a 6-point lead. I would point out to people who say Trump can't win in the general election. That's bullshit. Donald Trump was almost never ahead by anything in any poll in the general elections prior, including 2016, you'll remember. He was behind Hillary Clinton virtually everywhere. Supposedly, she should have run away with it. This is why the aggregators, etc., gave a 99.9% chance Hillary Clinton would be elected. New York Times, you'll remember those famous moments during our famous live stream at the time, where the little ticker that originally read 99% chance Hillary wins slowly moved in the other direction. And as of the last half dozen or so states, started to tip beyond the 50% point. And then eventually, of course, Donald Trump won. And as a reminder of that. And I think that Donald Trump right now, twice indicted, not an incumbent, so he doesn't have that advantage, at least over Biden. Biden technically has the incumbent advantage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Trump still manages to at least narrowly best him. Even if we assume a skew in the polls, he would win re-election probably right now if the general election were held today or tomorrow. I do believe that it is more likely than not that Donald Trump will actually go Grover Cleveland and win, barring several things. He dies, he is incapacitated, or he is disqualified for office. In the primaries, I don't see him losing. He's basically hidden behind a wall of silence right now, and he's still 32 or 33 points ahead of DeSantis, who's the only one else in the mix who has any form of viability whatsoever. I simply can't see a situation in which that massive of a gap in a crowded field where full of never-Trumpers basically flips. I just can't see that. I think the American people might go full 2016 on steroids. It's not MAGA, it's ultra MAGA. We're no longer flipping the bird to the establishment. We're tossing a goddamn hand grenade in your lap. I think the American people are ready to do that. It's the closest thing to a revolution that we can reasonably expect, and I think it would be a good thing. Under Trump, you can expect the same thing that you had in the first administration, by the way. The Republican unipartists will get together with most of the Dems and obstruct. They will slow down actual progress. Then they will blame the inevitable end result in the subsequent midterms, as well as down ballot races for 24, on Donald Trump. They will blame him. In the end, he will be combated and he will be war-torn. And a lot of these people will still be, because they write the history books along with their rich professor friends, they will still profess him to have been a massive failure. But he'll still have been Grover Cleveland mode. He'll still have been elected a second time. That is, in my opinion, that's the most likely thing that happens. Biden could enter the general election at his age and with his health issues and croak. Well, I mean, does that mean Kamala's the nominee? If she was the running mate, I suppose that you're running Kamala Harris. Do you honestly think that she would have a chance? Hell, she'd lose against Chris Christie. So, and again, there's at least a double-digit possibility that that's what happens over the next couple of years. Biden is incapacitated in some manner, incapable of continuing to campaign. And I guess you get Kamala Harris 2024. Based on literally every shred of logic, there's no possibility of her winning. She couldn't beat Pence. She couldn't beat DeSantis. She couldn't beat Christie. Maybe this is why they're hoping that Biden dies too and Trump is disqualified so that the GOP automatically gets some unipartist. And Jeb Bush would beat Kamala Harris. Ultimately, there's a double-digit chance that that's what happens. I like this. A poll from Quinnipiac on a possible Biden-Trump matchup puts Biden at 48, Trump at 44. Now, we're going to look at RCP really quick because, again, these people are getting afraid of the polling despite the fact that they're using one cherry-picked poll that doesn't even show the most dire possibility in the election, at least as far as if you're a Biden fan. Yes, Quinnipiac has Biden at +4. If I look at the other polls, somehow it gets far worse for the Democrats. You've also got a +2 from Yahoo News. Yahoo News is not necessarily the most reputable firm. I would prefer Quinnipiac. You have a tie from YouGov. They're pretty good. And by the way, a tie is pretty good for Donald Trump, considering the demographics of the actually competitive states. Let's see what other polls we have. Trump is at +5 in Marquette. He's at +6 in ABC, which is the parent network here that's making the goddamn report. They didn't even use their own poll. Inexplicable. +6 in Harris and +6 in Rasmussen. Well, that looks a lot different from the polling averages, generally speaking, in 2020 or 2016. They are far better for Donald Trump now than they were at virtually any point in 2020 or at literally any point in 2016. And this is while Biden, in his approval, is still not past his long-term soft floor, which he could fall through, not above his long-term soft ceiling for disapproval, or only very slightly, by half a point or a point or so. That could change. In an economy that has not yet slipped into a recession at a time when the U.S. is not directly at war, things could get far worse. What I would caution Trump is that it will come down in some voters' minds to who the running mate is. And you have to make sure that the person that's your running mate is better than Kamala Harris. Because right now, the Democrats, I think some of them are concerned about Harris being in there. Because they're like, okay, we're about to nominate an 83-year-old man. He'll be almost 88 years old when he leaves office, which means he probably dies in office. There is a better than 50-50 chance that he expires at some point in that term. That leaves us with Kamala Harris, and nobody likes her, including a majority of liberals. Donald Trump, therefore, should be looking at people. I mean, I know Kari Lake is the most obvious possibility, but it really only solidifies the core fan base. I'm thinking that Vivek Ramaswamy might be a better choice. I know Rand Paul would be my personal choice. I would choose him in a heartbeat. Him as VP would be glorious. I think Trump leans away from it because of his importance within the Senate. He should definitely consider it. If he does that, I will definitely applaud him for it. But I think he's probably going to choose someone else. And if he wants to choose someone not currently in the field, you need to be careful about who you choose, is what I would say. Kari Lake is okay, but it would really be a symbol that he's solidifying his core constituency and is less. He considers it of lesser important to reach out against to independent voters that may have a problem with Kari Lake, actually. Let's see. There's all sorts of super chats here. I'll try to get through everything. Sparky, one report said that each tourist paid $250,000 to see the Titanic from the sub. That could be why. Still sounds high, though. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Although you have to float a ship out in order to deploy the submersible. So, you know, you're paying for crew and fuel and stuff like that. So kind of makes sense. RNAO Roger, the hatch of the sub is sealed by virtue of the pressure from the outside. It cannot be opened until the pressure is safe. Yeah, good luck unscrewing it as well. Mr. Twisted Frenzy. Hey, Sticks, what do you think the consequences will be if Trump does get JFK'd? Civil war, public executions, nothing at all, etc.? You definitely see a lot of riots. And then they would be blamed on MAGA being extremists. Oh, yeah, we literally killed a former president to keep him from taking office again. You're the extreme ones. And that would be what would happen. That would be the truth. It would be portrayed differently, though. It would be a Harvey Oswald moment. Some random Middle Easterner or something like that would be blamed as a patsy. And then they would say anyone that is acting out is the real problem in the country. A lot of people would see through it. Wartooth 88. They went to investigate strange SOS echo. Kevin Dunn, Sticks, if women should be able to put the child up for adoption if she doesn't want it, why are you critical of men who don't want to pay child support? Well, because it's called responsibility, personal responsibility. Takes two to tango. But if the child has left that couple entirely, look, a woman wants to put it up for adoption, but the man says, no, I'll take care of it. Well, that's fine. Let him file for child support. I'm not against men getting child support either. It's about who supports the child. But if it ends up in the custody of the state or adoptive parents or something like that, it has nothing to do with the woman. Let's see. Not a banned account. Do we expect enough honk for Biden to re-elect? We mean reselect. I think that they're iffy on it, and that's why they're doing the indictments. I think they're genuinely concerned that they're not going to be able to scrape together enough plausibility. Earthbound Misfit, a lib friend of mine, came to me and said, Trump 2024. I didn't think he would ever come around. There is hope. Clank. Good. The Landlord Harassment Channel, Trump Warwick 2024. Yeah, no thanks. I would have to relocate to D.C. By the way, being in Trump's cabinet or as VP would be hell. He is not known as the compromising type. You would definitely be run down if you displease him in any way. Nobody who's ever worked with the Don has ever said he's an easy boss to work for. I don't do very well with people lording over me. I think that our personalities would clash quite a bit. Rockstar Podcast. Do you think Gilligan was on that sub? Hopefully the professor is down there. Yeah, I mean, they might be, but the off chance is that there's just some sort of topical glitch and from within the sub they managed to fix it. That's the hope. It's just not likely, unfortunately. They're probably toast. They're probably going to die. Next news story. Jewish teacher resigns after anti-Semitic harassment from 12-year-old student. And I have so many goddamn complaints about this particular story not making sense. First, links in the description. You can read this for yourself. This is Mr. Robblee. Dear Mr. Robblee, I'm going to try to read this and decipher what was said. It looks like Norse runes. I personally hate you and you wear, no cap, a man bun. So I switched to telling a teacher I don't appreciate you. That's roughly a translation of the note that was handed to this teacher. There's a picture on the side, ostensibly of Adolf Hitler, although it's not 100% sure because it looks like Hitler had chemotherapy recently because there's no hair. This is the greatest moment as far as memes go. This is somehow a 12-year-old kid has created the ultimate smuggy. This is at least as funny as Wojak or Pepe. On the meme side, this kid should definitely get an A+. On the side of writing coherently, this is a 12-year-old, so this is a kid that's almost in middle school. I want you to look at that note. Does it look like it was created by the average middle school student, or does it look like something from the second grade? It looks like something from a kid that's 8, 9, 10 years old maximum, and possibly on the latter end would be developmentally disabled. This student claims that this teacher bullied him. So on one occasion, berated him in front of other students. On another, made a face at him and stuck his tongue out at him in the hall in retaliation for him saying something we're not sure. And the teacher has resigned. Can I please ask how we got so pussified that anyone would accept the concept that a teacher would resign from their position, presumptively assuming a pension in the process, because a 12-year-old who are so notoriously polite decided to show him a picture that may or may not be Charlie Chaplin because we're not 100% sure. I mean, other than the claim of the teacher saying that the student said homophobic things, I'm just seeing a picture of Mr. Potato Head with a little mustache. Well, I mean, have you questioned the student and, you know it to be Adolf Hitler? Apparently there were draft copies, so I'll argue devil's advocate and assume that the story is true. I'm also looking into the possibility that this is a what you do in moment. Hey, this looks a little bit overly juvenile for the average 12-year-old. Did the teacher himself do this in order to get around the school board, invoking retirement early in order to get a pension and sit on his ass for an extended period of time? We might actually find out that that's the case. By the way, again, this is a 12-year-old. They're not even a teenager. They're in elementary fucking school. This is a young kid. This student has now been charged with criminal harassment. Now, yes, it's through a juvenile court, so you're not going to end up going to prison or something like that. Hate crimes aggravation, although I'm sure that the liberals would love to push for that. Isn't it a little bit draconian to go after a 12-year-old? This is not violent behavior. Teacher didn't have to accept the note. Teacher could have, and by the way, the teacher is the authority figure. You can give the student suspension, detention, timeout, et cetera, with no problem. You've got wide latitude to do that. Instead, you decided to complain to the school board excessively, resign from your position, instead of punishing the student for supposedly being massively offensive. Nothing about this makes any goddamn sense other than the meme is funny as fuck. I mean, look at how it's drawn. The look on its face evokes smugness. Somehow a 12-year-old has more mimetic abilities than 99% of adults. I talked years ago in Mimetic Occultism, another book available, by the way, link up above pinned on YouTube. I talked about the concept of irreducible complexity. So you want to make something as simplistic, especially an image, simplistic as possible while evoking a concept. This evokes smugness, or that Adolf Hitler took 420 very literally and decided to become a ganja smoker because he looks a little bit blitzed out of his mind in this leukemia picture. But when I look at the text involved, I'm also saying, isn't there a possibility that the student is mentally troubled? Because this is not the kind of script that I would expect from a 12-year-old. I would expect it to be much more grammatically correct, formatted a little bit better. I would expect it to look a lot better than this. Is this like the problem child of the school that has severest mental derangement of some sort and refuses to learn? Well, if so, why wasn't that brought up earlier? I mean, you're failing the child. Now you're going to drag him in front of juvenile court potentially put him in juvie for a fucking drawing. Oh, that poor teacher, a 12-year-old was mean to you. Again, I never thought that this could possibly happen. 12-year-olds are so well-behaved, aren't they? Kids that are right at the cusp of puberty are the most well-behaved, respectful people in the world. They help little old ladies across the street. They would never disrespect their teacher. They're just such avid learners, and they sit there all happy and singing songs. And what is it, 1955? What the fuck have you been huffing? A 12-year-old was mean to me. I'm resigning. The school board wouldn't immediately take note of the situation. A 12-year-old decided to mock me about my man bun, and the school board didn't immediately punish the student. So I'm leaving and taking my toys and going home. This says more about the teacher being a fucking pussy than anything else. A pussy teacher, apparently underzealous, allegedly school board that will now be pressured to go full overzealous. A court system that is completely goddamn stupid. Again, even the possibility that this kid gets a day in juvie for disrespecting a teacher being that young is completely wrong and stupid in every way. And the taxpayers, by the way, have to fund that shit. I think the meme is pretty funny. And it is funny. I'm tired of pretending that stuff like this isn't hilarious. Do you remember the internet of the 2000s? It was Hitler was posted constantly, usually in a comedic context. He was smoking weed or something like that. Fucking stupid. Let's see. Where were we here? Trying to find out. My apologies. Sparky, remember, Putin was on the fence about invading Ukraine. Kamala's speech at the Munich Security Conference helped him decide. Kamala always puts her foot in her mouth and up her ass, usually one after the other, repeatedly. Charles Argo, hi from South Africa. Vivek is a great VP pick. He would control the cabinet. I think that you could do worse. I still prefer Rand Paul over everyone else. It's a very, very long shot. The gunslinger. If they JFK the Don, do we wave the rebel flag? Well, if you go carrying pictures of Chairman Mao, you ain't going to make it with anyone anyhow. So, no, I would not do that. I would definitely encourage people to speak out, if not act out. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. If it happens, we'll talk more about it in the future. Probably is a new tech exclusive for a reason. But no, waving the rebel flag around will just, add more fuel to the fire of people declaring that the people who have a problem with us assassinating a former president are the extremists. True, 5 a.m. in California right now. Also, do you prefer utilitarian ethics, cringe, bad, wrong, or deontological ethics, based, accurate, and good? In my opinion, ethics are subjective, and I don't really care about the concept. I just do my thing. I believe in the NAP. That's the highest goal that I believe in. Don't harm others, and you should be able to do basically whatever you want. John Hoyle, white student draws bad picture. Major issues. Minority physically attacks teachers. Crickets. That's our system. Yeah, what happens to all of those young scholars that attack their teachers physically, sometimes with deadly weapons? I don't see them getting dragged before juvenile courts half the time. No, it's a slap on the wrist. You get suspension or something like that. But don't you dare draw the fucking cartoon of Cancer Hitler. Blind Boy Gaming. The 80s Titanic expedition subs were controlled by insanely long tow cables. Interesting to know. Everything's wireless these days. We've regressed. Ashley, a 12-year-old kid was mean to me. Here's $2. Yeah, it's never happened to me before. No kid has ever walked up to me back when I was a kid or thereafter and said or done anything that would be vaguely considered insulting. It never happens. When the school bus goes by, you never get mocked by a 12-year-old. It's completely unheard of. They never shout obscenities out of the bus window. Dude, the kids are all right. Don't worry about them. They're not quite as cajoled by authoritarianism as people would believe. I have a feeling that if I were to do hello kids and go into an elementary school right now and talk to the kids, you'd find they have basically the same sense of humor that kids my age did back when I was that age. Jesus loves you. Sticks, what's the teacher's name? Mr. Robblee. Apparently, or Robbie, it's not 100% sure. Gristle Lumps, my 7-year-old writes better than that. I'm calling hoax. Yeah, it looks, there's something about this that's a little bit off. Some people are calling the cartoon Glowler because they're assuming that the teacher may have been the one that created it. While I'm not sure, there's a possibility, and I really want to look more into this because I have a feeling that we might be spinning the ultimate summer meme in vain. But we'll wait and see. Mulgera 85, what's your opinion on the Colorado LP pseudo collaborating with the Colorado GOP? They're promising not to run an LP candidate if the GOP candidate is palpable for the LP. That's the way to do it. It's called strategy. Swamp Donkey 69420, did you see the SCOTUS ruling on the New York gun case? No, I have not yet. I'll have to look that up. Mrs. Tag, thanks for being here today. Please send some wisdom about depression if you can. The way to tackle negative energy is to transform and alchemize it. Wrote a booklet on the subject called Emotional Alchemy long ago. I've been a step from homelessness, deeply depressed, anhedonia, post-OD, etc. Before. And what I found, and I've been dogpiled by people for years, sticks man bad, you're talentless, you're worthless, etc., trying to make me fail. What I realized is it was best to think about it from this perspective. And Osho actually spoke about this, although he has a different perspective on the usage of this energy. Take that negativity and use it as an impetus to get past it by self-succeeding. So understand you've got critics. They don't like you. You have family that's pieces of shit or something. Rise above it, succeed, and then bask in the fact that they have to see you succeed and they burn the bridge with you. So they have to watch you be a success more than them. They feel like failures. You're not doing anything negative to them. You're not stooping to their level and being negative and calling them out, calling them names, trying to harm them in a direct capacity or anything. They're pissed because you succeeded. They're pissed because they were wrong, and people don't like to be wrong. Emotional alchemy. And if it's not because of that, if it's just clinical depression, get more sunlight, exercise a bit more, eat healthy, try to develop some new skills, some new hobbies. Again, anything that makes you succeed more is always a positive way through things. You want to become a workaholic, work 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, that's perfectly fine. Anyone criticizing you for that is an asshole. So, and that's the other thing. Just realize that if it's related to people putting you down, well, opinions are like asses. Everyone has one. Some of them are more stinky than others. Toxic Mix. I keep hearing DeSantis Simps insisting he's the guy because he'll fight wokeness. What I've yet to hear is how and why someone else in the field can't do the same. Yeah, they also don't realize that a chief executive in some ways has less power than a governor does. There's more constraint on that power. So next news story. I'm going to run through these ones a little bit quicker because we're going up towards 45 minutes already. Why Russophobia has become a moral obligation. Yes, you heard that right. There is a moral obligation to hate Russia and Russian people, according to this particular link. Very interesting. I would like to point out that this is kind of similar to the things that were said about the Germans, the French, the British, and every other party that ever participated in a major war in the past. This is the ugliest side of propaganda, rendering the group that you're opposing as a one-dimensional entity and as homogenous. So a Russian dissident or a Russian that has come to the United States, they become a citizen, they still speak Russian, they cook a lot of Russian food maybe, and runza or something. They eat borscht instead of eating hamburgers, and they get ridiculed. You should be phobic towards them. Can I please ask all of the people that want to dogpile Russians because of Putin's dumb state policies, how is this any different to the long castigated concept of looking down at Middle Eastern people in hijabs or robes and turbans or something like that, back in 2004? How is it any different? And the end result will be the same. The people that are publishing these articles, once the war eventually ends, which, once they move on to the next war for profit, they'll end it. Once the war ends or cools down, there's at least a stalemate and a kind of peace or something, a ceasefire. All of these people mysteriously will no longer have the same opinion, and they'll pretend that they never had it in the fucking first place because they're basically just being a bunch of war-happy bigots. The idea of casting off a foreign group of people as one-dimensional is always war propaganda, and it always happens. Look at Syria, for example. United States under Obama gets involved in Syria. We start saying the FSA are freedom fighters. Yeah, they're Islamic terrorists that want to destroy a secular state, but there are terrorists, so it's okay. No mention of the Alawite minority, of which Bashar al-Assad is part of, not being Islamic at all. No mention of the nuance of the Yazidi and similar groups in that general region. No mention of the Turkish minority either and their different subculture. No mention whatsoever. It's just Syria bad. Ergo, all Syrians bad. Oh, you're a Syrian Christian? Well, you're still bad, and we don't want to talk to you because Bashar al-Assad bad. Obama told me that Syrians are bad people. It's the same fucking bullshit as always. I'll always be anti-war. I can oppose Putin's invasion of Ukraine while understanding the nuance that not every Russian supports it. No, they're not all a bunch of vatniks or anything, any more than the all Ukrainians a bunch of holes. Yes, they all unwaveringly support Zelensky. No, they don't. Millions of them fucking fled the country. They don't want to fight. Some of them can't fight. They want to be left alone to grow beets and shit like that. I sympathize deeply. I wish I was growing beets right now in a climate that wasn't 85 degrees. People are people. There's good and bad in every country, among every race, etc., every ethnicity. There's no such thing as a bad people in the world. There's one-dimensionality is the cancer of mankind, the tendency to engage in just fucking horse shit like this. And all these people, again, all of these people after the war will forget that they ever said such things. Oh, no, I never disliked Russians. And, you did. We'll archive the article. The archive will still be there when you finally try to scrub it from the internet. And maybe I'll email the company that hosted it, and I'll chuckle about it and make another video. Horseshit. Jesus loves you. Have you ever heard of Earl Nightingale? And if so, would you consider his media and content a cult? If not, search the strangest secret in the world. Haven't heard of him. I can take a look. Corto Maltese, did you say leukemia? I had leukemia. Fun times. It's my sympathy. I can't imagine that it is, but that particular picture, Hitler does look like he may have been on radiotherapy or something like that, or taking chemochems. Not a bad account. Can we inter Russian nationals for public safety? There have actually been people who have argued for such a thing unironically, although not largely in the United States. I don't think the public's quite that far gone that they would support it. We tried that before. It was apologized for and declared unconstitutional retroactively for a reason. Next news story. Russia claims to have remotely detonated tank laden with explosives, an apparent new tactic. Yes, the new tactic for Russia, allegedly, we'll get into that nuance briefly, is that they are taking older gen tanks, ladening them with thousands of pounds of explosives, plastic explosives, and then using a remote control to drive it towards targets. And I thought to myself, on one hand, fog of war style, we're not 100% sure this is true. It's possible. So let's investigate a couple of reasons to believe it is, a couple of reasons to believe it isn't. To believe it's not true, it's not that practical. Yes, tanks that are older are not as expensive as like a modern Russian tank or a missile, but they're still expensive. You still run the risk that, of course, an object with 2,000-3,000 of explosives gets hit with something that detonates the explosives. Well, then you've lost the tank, you've lost the individual driving the tank, you've lost the explosives, and you haven't done jack shit. It's risky. However, in favor of it, even an older gen Russian tank should be able to handle most topical, like small arms aren't going to do anything. Take a while for a material rifle to eat through that as well, even if it was high end and it was a really old tank. So it makes sense from that perspective. If you only under one condition, this is why I think this may have happened. If the enemy area, according to the Russians in this case, had a lot of anti-air systems, so you're like, well, we could fire a missile at this hardened target, but there's not a great chance it's going to hit, and missiles are expensive. But we've got this old tank from the mid-1960s that costs 1/10 of what the missile and the cost, even once it's filled with explosives. And the anti-air system can't target the tank, and we might be able to get it through. That's pretty much the only reason I think a kamikaze tank would make sense. I would point out that the Russians have several thousand old gen tanks in service still that they have. They've got some of the new ones, the Armata tanks, and I think they've got a modified update now as well in the last couple of years. But they still have a lot of tanks, including some I think that actually are retrofitted from World War II. Yeah, I suppose 3,000 pounds of plastic explosives in, a tank would do some damage. Definitely. I will remain skeptical until further information is forthcoming about this particular case. By the way, please send no more super chats. I've got a couple more news topics here, and I want to get through them in a timely fashion. Eric Herrera, the cat looks high. Lol. It smells once again like cat piss. I believe that the cat decided to relieve itself on the floor somewhere in proximity to me. Isn't it joyful when it's humid and 85 degrees? Thank you, kitty. It's like she says, look at her. She's fucking meditating. Yes. You are the picture of comfort. Jesus Christ. What a ham. Eyes wide open are yours. Can we inter Californians for safety? I'm in Texas. Probably do better than interring Russians. Sparky, the cat got into the catnip stash again. She actually did get some earlier, but she hasn't had any lately. Corto Maltese. In World War II, the Russians experimented with remote-controlled tanks, and the Germans did with small-track vehicles that were packed with explosives. Yeah, the basic premise, why would you trot that out unless you did so in necessity because you were desperate to destroy a target? Russia's military is so much bigger and beefier, I would think that they'd, have the ability to drop a missile on the target. Crossover Maniac. Trump's best bet at winning 2024 is to ballot harvest. Fight fire with fire. That will counter Dem honking. Look up Scott Pressler. He's trying to help with this maneuver. Drew and Albane. The kid with the 2 gender shirt lost his case. That is because of the technicality of the school being tax funded. And so the other students are because they have to go to school, it's compulsory, they are being forced to interact with the there is 2 gender shirt. It's kind of a bullshit technicality. It doesn't really make sense, but the technicality does actually exist. That's why you should not use a state-funded school to educate your children. Sparky, cats piss like that to show resentment. In her case, it is to show territorialism. Next news story. Breaking. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken gives China the green light to invade Taiwan. This is a fear-mongering story on which the right wing is being wrong and hyperbolic. The United States has had a one China policy now for more than half a century. The fact that Blinken would come out and say the same thing that every other Secretary of State has had to say since the mid-1970s is not actually a problem. I have to defend goddamn Anthony Blinken on this one. There's a reason why there's a fucking community note on this particular post. We do not support Taiwan independence, says Blinken. Yeah, that's because there's only one China. Now, in the old days prior to, I think, 74, the United States said that the real China was Taiwan. We got the bright idea that we could bribe China back out of the Stone Age of communism by selling them Coca-Cola. So we said, okay, we're willing to recognize China so we can trade with them. And then we'll use Coca-Cola and McDonald's and Chevrolet and things like that to woo them away. Economically, it worked like a charm. The United States' unmitigated success in the latter half of the Cold War was through economics. The problem is the authoritarianism never went anywhere. The next problem is that those authoritarians got rich because we were trading with them and then turned around and started using that money to subvert our societies. What we should do is recognize Taiwan as the sole heir of that one China. We should abandon Beijing and let China collapse entirely. Without Western trade, China would fall. They've got no capability of even feeding their own population. Chinese communism would collapse, the people would revolt, and China would undergo a revolution. That's what we should do. But that wouldn't make any money now, would it? So we'd prefer to continue impotently complaining while kicking the can down the road. I don't think that China eminently wants to invade Taiwan at all. Right now, they're just part of globalism. They can do it at their leisure. You think that the United States will in the end do anything about it anyway? The people of the United States don't even want to do anything about it. We could stop it right now with simply lobbying them to adopt a Second Amendment militia model and then airdropping several million AR-15s on them, which would make a shit ton of money off of, by the way. Well, why aren't we doing that? It's because they want to hold it over the heads of the Taiwanese and American people, while China gets to bloviate to its own people about how strong we are and we can recapture Taiwan at any time. We're being cautious about it, and we're holding back. Out of respect for international norms and diplomacy, we're holding back at this time and hoping that diplomacy and negotiation work. It's just a long-term fucking game. Basically like something from Dr. Strangelove. Now we just have to wait for the accident to happen. Sparky, I read the cat piss reference. And he also posted, make Ukraine Russia again. Why would I want to do that? Sparky, Blinken, Newland, and Sullivan are psychopaths who replace the sociopaths who normally run U.S. foreign policy. Yeah, to an extent. They're a little bit out there. And then the final news story. Americans say no thanks to woke corporations, according to a TIPP poll here. Yes, apparently, the one thing I wanted to cover in here is that apparently 30% of Democrats don't like DIE. I mean DEI. It's a fairly unifying concept. Independents lean heavily, by the way, towards opposing that, like the ESG stuff too. Even a significant minority, though, of Democrats don't support it. I'm beginning to wonder why that, if that's not why the corporations are beginning to become more hesitant about pushing this sort of thing. I would be hesitant about it too. If I had a corporation, I'm like, okay, I can get investment by pushing wokeness, but then people at some random moment might boycott me. It might be out of my control. It could be that one of the branch stores posts a display that people consider objectionable for religious or moral reasons. It goes viral on Twitter and all of a sudden 10% of my income is gone. I would be mighty hesitant to therefore suck the teat of ESG. The boycotts are working. That's why they're being talked about at all. Trust me, the left would have liked to have pretended the boycotts never existed, Budweiser, Target, and so forth. The fact that they're talking about them at all and therefore giving them attention so more people know that they exist as a concept is out of desperation. It's because it's working. The right wing has learned from the left about the concept of boycotts, which is something, it's like a lost art for conservative movements for the last half century. They finally decided that it was a good idea, belatedly. It would have been helpful if they would have done it before. But again, look, they will probably overstretch at some point and headlong off the cliff into total moralism and authoritarianism, as opposed to right now simply saying, hey, could you please not sexualize small children? Hey, I'm not buying your beer because I don't like TikTok because TikTok's dumb. Mulgara85, Russophobia is moral? I guess I gotta hate my girlfriend now. God, what a bunch of clowns. Lol. Yeah, every Russian is evil, according to that particular article, and you must repeatedly tell them that. This, by the way, will absolutely break the resolve of the Russian people who do, by and large, support Vladimir Putin, although I have a feeling that the voting trends there might be a little bit fortified, too. Let's just put it that way. Eyes wide open are yours. Biden, Fetterman, confused speeches. Basically, you could just say Biden and Fetterman speeches. They're all confused. That's the problem. Dagnabbit32, have you talked to the cats about the Chinese restaurant if she doesn't stop peeing everywhere? I constantly make such jokes. Say there's a nice Asian family just down the street. Maybe they're looking for a pet. Swamp Donkey, DEI is anti-white. I seriously want a legal litigation organization to go after the anti-white racists. Yeah, good luck getting a lawyer willing to be disbarred for even bringing up the case. It's a whole problem. The whole justice system is wrecked at the moment. Anyway, I'm going to go offline. I thank you to the almost 5,000 people tuning in live. And thank you for your kind and generous super chats as well. But I've got other things I have to do. Liz is cooking tonight, so that's one thing. It's hella hot, so I'll probably have to fucking shower at some point, even though I'd rather just do more book stuff. Once in a while, you got to clean yourself up, wash your body, as Frank Garrett would say. And there's other shit to do, too. Some more cleaning, hang out with the baby, etc., have a little snack. I'm going to enjoy my afternoon, and hopefully there will be a thunderstorm. I'm really hoping. You can pray for me. Pray for rain, because the rain dances didn't work. That's about all.